Hello everyone, over the next few weeks I'll be on a bit of a paternity leave sort of thing while we welcome player 3 into the household. Now during that time there's going to be some creators that are going to take over the sort of channel, and today is no different. Kicking us off we have Barb, otherwise known as Meeple PhD, to talk all about one of the best themes in games, space.
Hi, I'm Barb. First of all, I'd like to thank Oliver for inviting me over to his channel for a little discussion about space as a theme in games. When he and I were messaging about this video, we discovered that we both had a background in astrophysics, and so this seemed like the perfect topic. I'm an astronomer. I currently lead a small communications team where we share stories about science anywhere from the nearest nebula to the farthest galaxies. And so when I look at space in games, I have maybe a little bit different perspective than some of y'all out there. But don't worry, I'm not here to rain on anyone's parade. I love space as a theme in games. I think it has some beautiful imagery and lends itself to some really creative things that you can do in games. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. So when I think about kind of the broad picture of space in games, I see a continuum of things. On one end, you've got games where space is just window dressing. It's a theme that's slapped on there because it has pretty images or lends itself to beautiful art, but it's a game that could really be any topic, any theme. And then on the complete other end, you have games where the designers are clearly trying to get something about astronomy across in their games, using whatever mechanisms they think are appropriate to do that. And maybe space is the only way to get those mechanisms across, or it just happens to work out really well for them. So I'm going to talk about a couple different games on either end of that spectrum, and then one kind of in the middle. So one game that I really thought was interesting in how it treated an astronomical topic was called Eons. It is a card game where players are building up star systems in front of them. And they're adding planets to these stars. But the one thing that this game was really trying to get right as far as astronomy is the life cycles of stars. So there are two types of stars we typically talk about as in astronomy: low mass stars, kind of like our sun, and high mass stars, really big ones like you've maybe heard of Betelgeuse, a star that's maybe on the verge of going supernova and has been in the news in the last couple of years. So this game has both of those types of stars, and they're treated a little bit differently. Both of them, during the main parts of their lives, and in this game, produce different kinds of elements. And so in the game, you have cubes for the basic elements like hydrogen, and then you trade those up for better and better elements as the star kind of ages a little bit. And then at some point, the stars can die out. You can play cards on them to make them die out. The higher mass ones, they're going to go supernova, so you play a supernova card on them. I found this really cool because it was very clear that the designer of this game had, knows something about the stellar evolution and really wanted to get that across during the game. Now there are a couple things that they had to do for gameplay, playability in this game. One of them is, I don't remember exactly how this worked. It's been a few years since I played this game. But in the large mass stars, there was kind of and then a miracle occurs, and you pay some really valuable elements and get some of the basic elements back. And of course, that's not really how it works in the stars, but I'm guessing you had to do that for gameplay so that you could get some of those lower value hydrogen and helium. Not that those are low value, they have a lot. There are a lot of them in the universe. They're really cool, but in the game they were lower value, and you probably needed a mechanism to get those back into your economy in order to, kind of keep your game going. And that was fine. I have no problem with that. The one thing that they got wrong in the game is that when you play a black hole on one of your large stars, it was labeled as supermassive black hole. Supermassive black holes are a totally different kind of black hole that don't come from collapsing stars. Those are called stellar mass black holes. Supermassive ones are millions to billions of times the mass of our sun. And they reside at the centers of galaxies. But again, it's a minor thing, especially if you're not an astronomer. And the rest of the game really does have a great arc in teaching people about how life cycles of stars work while having a playable and fun game behind it. So at the other end of the spectrum, you have games where space is just a theme. It's not there necessarily because the mechanisms require it or any other reason than to be a source for the art. One of the games that I really like that's on this end of the spectrum is called Space Park. It's from the same folks who brought us Parks, so as you can imagine, the art is gorgeous. When I saw it on Kickstarter, for me, it was an insta-buy because of the art. In this game, you are imagining that you're visiting different parks around maybe a solar system or around a galaxy, and you're collecting crystals, which you ultimately turn in for badges. Kind of like, at least I think of it as a junior ranger program for the national parks, but in this case, for the galactic parks. Again, the art is gorgeous, but the space theme doesn't need to be there. It's just very pretty. So those are games on both ends of the spectrum. What about something in the middle? So for me, Beyond the Sun would be kind of that middle ground where it's more than just a pasted on theme, but it's not really trying to teach you a whole lot about space or space science. This is a game with a big tech tree. It kind of looks like Spreadsheet the game, at least part of the board, and players are building out this tech tree together in order to create new starships, move their people around this exploration board, and colonize different planets. The place where, for me, the astronomy really comes in is on that exploration board. There are a few planets, and if you look at them, they are real planets that we have found through various means. To me, it's really fun to look at this exploration board, look at the different planets as they come up, and recognize that I've heard of them before, and I know people who have studied them. So that's where this one is not quite a pasted-on theme, but it's not necessarily trying to teach you anything about astronomy. And it's kind of a middle ground, and I really enjoy it, and I enjoy that aspect of the game with the real planets. So that's a taste of how I see the theme of space in games. I'm curious to know what Oliver thinks, though.
So I'm not the best person when it comes to this. I did astrophysics at university, and I was the person that would go to the cinema, would watch a film, the others would say, oh, but that's not scientifically correct. And I would be like, I know, but it's a fun film, just going to turn my brain off for a bit. And I do that with themes in games to some extent, but I think Barb is right that if you can strike that balance and have something meaningful to do with the theme, like in Beyond Sun, where those locations are real locations, that's a cool thing that if you know the theme, it's that nice little extra for you. Or maybe there's that one part of the theme that they try to capture. Now, there's a number of games that do this. I'm thinking way back, sort of a good few years ago, there was a game called Planetarium where you would slowly work and spiral your way in and out, sort of in orbit, collecting these resources. And I always thought that was a cool concept. It was almost like a bit of a rondel where you could change path. And the orbit made sense. You're saying you're in orbit, if you're moving, you're traveling around, you're sweeping out that bit of orbit for the resources. It just kind of made sense. And I don't think that game would have worked better, or in fact probably as well, with a different theme. So I thought that was quite an interesting one. Another one that it has to be mentioned when you're talking about space. Twilight Imperium. There's not really that much going on that's factually correct. It's a made up sort of part of the universe. You've got these planets that do different things. That's quite interesting, actually, where some planets might give you a bonus. That kind of makes sense. If we lived on Mars, water wouldn't be as prevalent, so therefore we'd have to adapt, and maybe Earth would have that resource. All right, it's not quite like that in Twilight Imperium, but at least a certain planet might help you get a technology. That does kind of make some sense. And then around the system set up in Twilight Imperium, you've got sort of anomalies, you've got asteroid belts that you don't want to fly through, you've got different just things that are happening, like a black hole that you don't want to fly near because it might lose you a ship, and just things like that, where it's obviously it's not trying to be factual, but it's still cool with the theme. Let us know in the comments section below, what is your favourite space or astronomy themed game? And make sure you go and check out Barb on her own channel, and I'll pass you back to her just to tell you a little bit more about her channel.
Thanks again to Oliver for having me on his channel. If you like space and you like games, you should come out and check out my channel, Meeple PhD. I do a series of videos there called Cosmic Game Connections, where I find something in astronomy and I connect it to my game shelf. As an example, I had found a discovery where astronomers had found stars in our galaxy that moved in a way that said that they were not born here. And it was evidence that a previous galaxy had collided with the Milky Way early in its history. I connected that to Small World. How? Well, halfway through a game of Small World, if you look down on the board, you have a bunch of in-decline races strewn all across the board. And those are evidence of previous invasions across your land, similar to these stars in our Milky Way. So if that sort of thing interests you, come on over. You can also find me on the internet as Meeple PhD on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks again.